Hey everybody, I'm here with a few very interesting folks in the games business here, and my name is Dean Takahashi. I'm the lead writer for GamesBeat at VentureBeat. I've been covering games at VentureBeat for 17 years under the GamesBeat banner, but I've also been covering games for about 27 years altogether. And it's there's nothing else I want to do or am qualified to do as well. And I'm happy to have our guests here introduce themselves. Let's start with Owen.
Owen Mahoney. Been in the industry for about 20 years. I just retired as being the CEO of Nexon, which is a Korean-founded, Japanese-listed. When I retired, it was about a $23 billion market cap company with offices around the world. And before that, so I was there for about a decade. And before that, I was at Electronic Arts for about a decade.
Awesome. Tynan?
I'm Tynan Sylvester. I started making games when I was a teenager, basically. 12 years ago, I started my company, Ludion Studios, and we made a game called RimWorld. That was just me at the start, and it's grown up since then. Now it's about 30 people. And I wrote a game design book called Designing Games.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And Mitch?
I'm Mitch Lasky, and I've been in and around the games business for around 35 years now. Originally, don't laugh. That's unkind.
I know. I was like, I thought it was no kidding. Go ahead.
No, I'm Mitch Lasky, and I've been in and around the games business now for about 35 years. Worked at a number of big companies, including the Walt Disney Company, Activision, and Electronic Arts. Have also done a couple of startups, including first mobile game company to go public on NASDAQ, Jamdat. And most recently, I've been a venture capitalist with a portfolio that consisted mostly of games, entertainment, and social media companies. And I, as well, have recently retired and am now just working on some individual projects, including a podcast called Gamecraft that's about the business history of the video game business.
Awesome. Well, one of the interesting things happening now is that the games industry has gone through a very difficult couple of years here, and we're going to try to analyze some of that and figure out what's going on. One of the things that was fun for one of our GamesBeat conferences was Mitch and Owen did a fireside chat in the online only virtual days.
COVID.
COVID. Where they talked about a lot of the issues in the game industry and things like, say, the metaverse and blockchain and VR came up. And so we got some good analysis from them, a short few years ago. But it's nice to have you here again to maybe sort of refresh us on that conversation, I guess.
It's been a tough 2.5 years since we had that conversation.
It's gotten even more acute since we last talked about it.
I think so. I mean, I think at that time there was still some growth left in mobile. There was still some growth left in some of the online PC businesses. There wasn't this glut of venture-funded live service games on the market that we're now kind of in the midst of. And I think it's a lot more dire today than it was perhaps 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago when we had that conversation in this room.
Well, we were also getting tailwinds from COVID as well because there was a lot of people coming into games and particularly virtual worlds online because of COVID. So
a lot more dire though. Like I thought everybody was saying survive till 25, and this is 2025 now, right? And we're supposed to be in a sort of a better off position given that we had 2.5 years of
I think people said that because it rhymes and not because it made any sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the point that we were making at the time was kind of the table stakes for a AAA game, for a new AAA game is about $100 million at that time. Mm-hmm. It was actually more by then, but call it 2018, 2019. So, imagine, so the time Nexon was about $20 billion market cap company, and I was CEO. Mm-hmm. So you want to put out a new game that is really interesting. Imagine being in that position of greenlighting that game. But let's roll forward and look at what the numbers are today, just to show how more acute it is. But AAA game, table stakes are about $300 million to develop a new game. And imagine it doesn't work out. You're going to have a really hard discussion with your board of directors about how you manage to drill a $300 million hole into your $20 billion game company. It's like not an easy one. If you do it a second time, they're probably calling for your head. And by the third time, you've got at least one activist investor asking what the hell you're doing with their money. So it's pretty acute. So what does everybody do when they're in that situation? Not everybody, but you show me the incentive, and I'll show you the action. You end up trying not to have that happen, right? Like, so you think about, well, is this a genre that I know will sell? Are there a lot of customers for it? How do I mitigate my risk? And so a lot of companies ended up in a real red ocean. And when we had that conversation 2.5 years ago, it was like 150 million was sort of the cost. Today, it's been exploding. It's on a log scale that basically is going straight up. So it's even more acute now.
Yeah. And so what you did instead was put that money into sequels, right?
Well, I didn't do it this way, but what a lot of the industry did. Yeah, I mean, we found it. We identified this as a problem, and we knew that it was going to have a bad ending, and so we navigated a different solution. Which
I think sequels and brand licensing.
But brand licensing
they're both kind of like late stage, low growth solutions to this problem.
Sequels, copycats, brand licensing is how I'd probably phrase it.
Tynan, did you have any sort of weigh in here on
on the development since COVID? I mean, I think they covered the business case. I think that there's also been, I guess, more creative expansion, which has kind of covered some areas that were not completely mined out at that point. In some ways, it kind of looks like the tech has really slowed down in terms of the new kinds of things that it can do. It used to be we would be able to do totally new things every year, especially going back into the 90s, but even up in the 2000s. But since 5-10 years ago, you kind of could do the same thing from year to year. And it stands to reason that in an environment like that, there's a certain set of game structures that are kind of obvious, semi-obvious, easy to make, and work really well, and people are going to hit on those one after the other. And so there's a sort of filling in the slots effect that goes on.
I think that's a really important point, in particular the sort of slowing down of technological innovation piece, because I think this business has been driven historically by these stair-step functions in technology development. So you had the introduction of the GPU in the 90s, which kind of got us from Donkey Kong to Doom, basically. Yeah. And then you had the online explosion in the late 90s, early 2000s, and that enabled companies like Nexon, who was really the child of the internet. It couldn't have existed without
it.
And all of the MMOs and all of the MOBAs and other online games that were predicated on internet play. And then, more recently you had the mobile explosion, and that was another massive stair-step function. Ended up, from its humble roots when we were doing it, where we were doing it on, little Motorola flip phones, to the present day where it's, 100 billion of the 200 billion revenue that's generated in the business. And I think coming out of COVID, we had these three pretenders for that next stair-step function. And those were the things we talked about in the last episode, which was, metaverse, VR and Web3 and none of those things.
Esports.
I guess esports you could throw in that bucket as well. None of those pretenders really supplied that sort of growth stair-step function that these previous technologies had. And I think that brings us to sort of artificial intelligence, which is sort of the new pretender. And I think one that maybe we have a little bit more optimism about than perhaps those three that we dismissed back 2.5 years ago.
Well, I think there's a couple of things that have been really clear if you look at the analysis of those technology waves. First is games compared to other forms of entertainment responds to real new technology much better than like the CD-ROM was not good for the linear for music. And streaming certainly isn't good for music, the music business. I heard from someone the other day that they've just gotten back in the music business to where they were in, I think, 1998 or something like that. He may have told me that. It's quite amazing. Whereas online was a huge thing, as you said. But if you look through the numbers, each of those waves that you mentioned, so GPU plus call it CD-ROM is one wave. Right. Internet, another wave. Mobile is another wave. It basically triples the size of the industry. And
do you add free to play into that, or is
free to play is a part of online?
Yeah, it's sort of a business model / marketing strategy around particularly around online gaming.
Yeah, and Nexon invented the free to play model, but it was very differently conceived than the way it's done these days. But it basically tripled the size of the model. The other thing that was interesting about those waves that Mitch was talking about is, number one is they couldn't have existed before. So like you couldn't. It took a whole new crew of people to conceive of what an online game was. It took a whole new crew of people to make the first-person shooter, or the CD-ROM based game, or what have you. Same with mobile. Like I remember being at EA, and it was like does not compute. They couldn't. The stuff that Zynga was doing, and Jammed Out when EA bought Jammed Out was like you guys thought completely differently about the games business than you did at EA at the time, and same with online. And so it enabled a whole new class of companies that couldn't have existed before. Like literally the whole Korean industry came as a part of the internet. Same with China, same with Southeast Asia.
Tiny, do you have something?
I mean, I was thinking about free-to-play and where it came from. I think, a lot of these waves, they open up new things you can do creatively, but also distribution-wise. And free-to-play was driven by online payments and micropayments and the entire security infrastructure around that, which didn't exist in like 1997. You couldn't have done it. So I think it's not just about compute. It's also about the structure.
Yeah, it tried to do it with shareware in the early 90s.
And Ziploc bags don't work that well.
Exactly, Ziploc bags and 1-800 numbers to put your credit to type in your credit card. I mean, if id had happened 10 years later, it would have been a multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah. And Apple had amassed a lot of credit cards that you had just put into your Apple wallets, right? Yep. And so then it became so easy to pay for things on a phone. Yeah.
I think there's a third factor which might also be relevant, which is just market penetration demographically. Like, you're going back to the 70s. We've seen more and more computing and more technology, which opens up new creative space and new distribution models. But also, this has been accompanied by simply an expansion of the number of people who are accessing games, right? Originally, it was a group of nerds in Europe and the USA, essentially. And now it's everybody in India with a cell phone and everybody in China and Africa and so on and so forth. So there is a sense that, just numerically, there's a certain saturation happening there.
Bing has arrived.
There he is.
Right. The mystery guest.
Now we have our special mystery guest joining us just in time.
Eventually.
Yeah. All right. Bing Gordon, everybody. We're live. We're rolling. We're just going to keep on going.
Just like a lifetime of games, always late.
Yeah. Thanks for getting here, Bing. Appreciate it. Well, this is not a bad time to add a little context here to Matthew.
Right, I think they want to get his mic set.
Okay, you're going to pause. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Are you going to lean back like that or come forward?
Probably. Unless I get excited.
I'll give
That never happens.
Do you want a beverage?
Yeah, poor Bing's just got off a flight. We're putting you in the hot seat, Bing. Thank you.
Poor Binks. We sat on the runway for...
Yikes.
Oh, yeah.
Sorry about that.
Do you want something to drink?
Yeah, maybe eventually.
Let me know. I'll
But
text
this
me.
weather, they said it was going to be blowing and raining and everything, and it looks kind of
Kind of chill. Yeah.
Yeah,
It
good to
was
see you.
bad.
Good to see you, Bing.
great to see you. Dean's always there at the beginning.
Let me know
of
when
new
we're
stuff.
going to roll again, I guess.
Yeah, we'll keep going.
Roll.
Yeah,
Okay.
stop.
Here we go.
We didn't stop.
Okay. You just keep that part in. That's as interesting as anything we're saying.
So with our new special guest here, Bing Gordon, I thought maybe adding a little context into the conversation would be good. Matthew Ball dropped 224 slides that helped explain everything, or made the attempt to explain everything that's happened to the game industry, and caused some of the 34,000 layoffs and 2.5 years of sort of stalled growth. He had, say, free-to-play, 10 things that drove games for a decade, drove them forward. There were 8 things that were supposed to actually rescue games and provide more growth. They didn't work out, those 8 things. 15 things are challenges at the moment. And he had 11 possible solutions that could deliver growth in the future.
This man likes lists.
Anyone got a whiteboard?
Well, I know that because I just put out 6 slides that actually had these little balls of sort
ball.
of wisdom for each category. And I wonder, what is some of your reaction to some, say, the explanations here or the causes? What do you feel like maybe we should try to zero in on more among such a sort of cornucopia of different things that we could talk about, I guess?
I think Matthew does a really good job in that deck of laying out the reality on the ground. And I think the reality on the ground is something that often doesn't really get a lot of attention in the games business, which is sort of where we really are in terms of things like real revenue growth, real share of day versus linear media, real aggregation of audience, and the kinds of numbers that are really the macro numbers that are driving that $200 billion number that everybody likes to focus on. And the fact is that $200 billion number is under some threat, because a lot of the engines of growth that we've relied on for the last 25 years have really slowed down considerably. And I feel like
the number is under threat, or the growth rate is under threat?
The growth rate's
for sure.
The growth rate's definitely under threat. And I think that the top line number is under threat. I think that we could see actually negative growth in the video game business at some point. And so I think he does an excellent job of that. And I think he does also a very good job in that deck of laying out ideas, I would call them, for potential growth accelerants. I would argue that one of his 8, for example, as I recall, was pricing Grand Theft Auto 6 at $100 a unit or $120 a unit. I would beg to differ in terms of whether I consider that to be something that will re-spark growth in the video game business. I agree with his overall point, which is that pricing in the video game business hasn't kept up with inflation, et cetera. But I also feel like the surfeit of games that are available on platforms like the iOS App Store or on Valve's Steam has a limiting factor in terms of how much you can charge, because there are many substitutes.
Yeah, within the games industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Well, I think I always start with minutes played or hours played. Mm-hmm. And, my sense is people are doing more gaming, broadly speaking, than ever before. But I'm also spending time in other gamification areas in healthcare and fitness. So, I think the issue right now is the monetization in all media has been screwed up. It's screwed up in movies and TV. It got screwed up temporarily in music. Everyone I knew in the music business was wringing their hands, and then they found out that 99 cents wasn't so bad after all, and their artists could make money touring. So really the music business hit rock bottom first and found a way to climb out of it, and it's still not as robust even as it could be. So I think as long as people are putting minutes into games and game-like experiences, the money will take care of itself.
I think focusing on the experience is the right approach. I think in some ways, if you look at other media like music or film, in some way they're our future. There is new technical advances and new distribution advances and new design advances that open up new experiences that we can offer people, like new products, it's like a new food that they've never had before. And the most valuable thing you can put into the market is something that a lot of people want, but nobody can get anywhere else because it's never been made. But there is a point of saturation where you've kind of explored everything. And I think if you look at film, for example, the early history of film, they were coming up with new technologies, and then through CG and so on and so forth. And they had their own false starts, like 3D movies. Trying to grow, but I think at this point we understand that linear is linear, and then those sorts of shows and films are made the way they're made, and it's hard to say when this will happen, but it stands to reason that gaming would hit a similar point.
I think it's already happening, right? I think we've already seen the bifurcation that we've seen in Hollywood, where the middle has hollowed out of Hollywood. Nobody makes the sort of 30 to 50, 75, $80 million film anymore. It's only massive franchise Marvel movies on the one hand, and then Anora for $6 million or whatever on the other end. And I think that's happening in the video game business at this very moment. Like as we speak.
Well, I think that's a problem.
When SKU counts are being reduced at the big publishers, it's those middle-class products that are being wiped out.
Fewer, bigger hits.
Nobody's canceling Call of Duty. Nobody's canceling Grand Theft Auto. Nobody's canceling Assassin's Creed. They're canceling the experimental things that are medium budget. And then you have the stuff at the lower end, the Zeekers games that came out of Roblox, stuff like that are happening, or other things like that are occupying that sort of indie realm and are popping into the $100, $200, $300 million in revenue generation as sort of indie hits. But the middle has been really hollowed out, just like in Hollywood, just like you said.
Yeah, and I think that's
what was interesting about, say, Ball's analysis there was that, you have people playing all these games, but they're also playing these games for so much longer now.
For sure.
They're playing GTA Online, right? And they're just staying in there. I'm staying in war zones still a few years later. And then the reality of how much time any given gamer has to try a new game is just so much less than you think it is, right? It's like, 10% of their time or less, right?
Well, to offer you some perspective on that, so Nexon has a game called MapleStory. MapleStory has been in existence for about 23 years now. The last year that I ran Nexon, we grew that game around 30% year over year. That's 20 years in, 21 years in at the time. I mean, that's just astounding when you think about it. And it was double digit up for several years before that. So it wasn't like that was a fluke. So yeah, and you could play a lot of those games for a long time and a lot in any play session. So in one respect, I think you're really hitting on something that's really important. On the other, I'll tell you, I looked at 100, proposals for game development a year from inside or outside, mostly from outside. 95 of those easily looked very, very similar to something that came out before. So the idea was you're going to put a bunch of money up and have it under development, and you're going to end up right in the middle of a red ocean. Like that's just so our industry in some respects does a lot of that.
17,000 titles a year coming out on Steam, right?
Yeah, and a lot of those are, again, to the point that we said before, you're trying to you're going to put a lot of money into a game development of a AAA game. I'm talking about AAA, not casual. And then for all that work and that effort and all the difficulty of hiring really talented people, you're going to end up in a red ocean. It kind of doesn't work. And I think that explains a lot of the hollowing out. I mean, even back to the days of EA, some people who were running the studio at the time were like, fewer, bigger hits. And of course, it made economic sense to do that because the costs were going up so much.
But you're mortgaging your future.
But you're mortgaging your future. You're playing a smart short-term game. You're playing one that doesn't work out over the long term.
There was like a time when you could look at the time you're in and go look back in time for the lessons that you could find that would help you now, right? And I remember doing an interview with Kabam, right, where they were saying that mobile games has now come to that point where the top 100 titles is not where you want to land your game. Now you want to land your title in the top 10 because those are the only ones making money. It's like the fewer, better games notion that, PC and consoles got to a long time ago was coming to mobile, right? So you could pull that lesson from the past and change your strategy, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know where we are right now. Like, does anything really help explain this period of time, the last 2.5 years that we've had?
So when Electronic Arts started, 3 weeks after we raised a Series A, Atari announced that it wasn't going to make its quarter because E.T. got more returns than they originally shipped. My sense is that the games business has been uninvestable for kind of 4 out of every 6 years since 1982. And Mitch is saying there might be negative revenue. Well, there were in the year right before a new console came out, we had negative revenue. And so one of the things that EA had to do was double down on PC at the time, which was counter-cyclical to the console. But if you look back, if you can find an authoritative source of global revenue, I bet there's probably every 6 years since 1982, there's been 1 to 2 negative years. And the answer has always been new stuff and new platform one way or another.
I think distribution's really broken. And I think that's one of the problems. I think when you look at it, I think the reason we're at this moment that I would consider maybe more of a crisis than Bing would, given his last comment, is that we have very little technological innovation, we have very little distribution innovation, and we have very little kind of creative innovation simultaneously. And I think that's a rare kind of trifecta in the games business that we haven't historically seen that frequently. And what's going on with Steam and what's going on with the iOS and Google Play stores, is frightening to me, right? In the sense of just the consolidation at the top, the lack of movement, the lack of new products entering. I think Matthew in his 219 slide deck has one really interesting slide where he shows the top products for each year, and the lack of mobility. Is kind of frightening.
The average top 10 in the two major markets in about the last 4 years, the franchise was introduced 9 years ago.
Yeah.
So we have become kind of addicted to franchises as an industry.
So
I'm sorry. I was just going to say you're now seeing kind of the dark pattern behavior that you saw in mobile for the last 10 years or so showing up in the PC on Steam, where people are paying now to get listed on wish lists, which have like almost no purchase intent to them, right? I mean, you don't get an email address, you don't get anything. But people have figured out that Valve uses the velocity of wish listing as an early metric that they use to promote before they get actual sales data that they can then replace and use to promote. And so people are paying marketers to get wish listed for their games, and that's really terrifying to me, because when we started to see that kind of stuff happen in mobile, it was the beginning of the end.
However, back when we both used to be venture capitalists, we depend on incumbents being lazy. And, just because incumbents are lazy doesn't mean that newcomers always win. But we depend on incumbents being lazy.
Or maybe timid, as Owen would say.
And slow to new platforms.
Well, slow to new platforms. I mean, I can tell you, you guys have all run big companies. Like, you spend 100% of your day just trying to keep the wheels on the bus and keep growing. And everybody is hammering you at all times. And if you have one bad quarter, it's kind of like not fun. If you have two in a row, it's really not fun as a public company. So you spend a lot of time just delivering on today's business. And the trick is you actually have to have a balance between delivering today's numbers and delivering tomorrow's numbers. And the CEOs I think we all admire of big companies are the ones who are able to sort of keep that in dynamic balance. And the games industry has gotten challenged at that, I think. I thought about this all the time, but whereas from the venture community, you can do something completely new and different. But I think one of the, going back to your question before about what's going on, I think about this when I look at, like you mentioned Zeekers, for example, for Lethal Company or Minecraft. It reminds me a lot of The Sims. In The Sims, I don't think we talk enough about some of these games in what happened, but like The Sims was totally different than anything that appeared before. So you've got a very differentiated game, but we were able to launch it on distribution kind of with Madden, right? Because we had big leverage in the channel.
Because EA controlled the channel.
Because EA controlled the channel,
and
exactly.
People, and everyone looks back at EA historically and like looks at the products and whatever, looks at Madden, looks at the licensing, but it was their control of the channel. At Activision in the late 90s, we would sit around the conference room table at the senior management level, and Bobby and Brian would complain that EA could put 30% more product of any product into commerce than we could. And that was an enormous advantage.
And that has gone away
Yeah, indeed.
Completely gone away. Yeah. The channel has taken over.
I am curious about what this means sort of more on the ground level. Like, we have been talking a lot about CEO problems, I guess, right? But for people working in the game industry, like what signals can they look forward to make themselves, survive this really rough patch, like 2.5 years, 34,000 layoffs. This fellow Amir Satvat, who is on LinkedIn, he has become sort of like the game jobs champion because he has put up all the resources of all the jobs in games that are open in the world up into spreadsheets, and you can see all the artist jobs that are available. You could figure out what city you want to move to have the best chance of getting the job. Things like that. And traditionally, like he's doing this part time in his off hours, trying to keep up with 3,000 game companies around the world, and doing an admirable job because he's kind of a quant, but still, the game industry doesn't seem to have, been able to take care of its people very well. And, what can these people sort of look forward to, if anything?
I mean, that's tricky because if the industry is contracting in general, if there's 20,000 fewer people being employed overall, then someone's going to lose that competition, right? So from an individual's point of view, that grand problem isn't one that they can, immediately solve. It's ultimately feels like a zero-sum competition at that point.
I think it gets worse before it gets better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it gets worse because of artificial intelligence. And then I think it will get better. I think in the short term, though, and I think it's a mistake that is being made in entertainment industries across the board in various different fields, whether it's film, whether it's music, whether it's TV, whether it's the games business, and that is to view AI purely as a labor problem. Like as a job loss problem.
Yeah.
Because I do think that it has an opportunity to be that next stair-step platform enabler that will start creating jobs.
Yeah. Yeah. So sorry.
I'm reminded, I did time at USC in the beginning of the games program. And, about a third of the kids would take AAA labor jobs. And then there was Genova Chen.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you saw Genova early on and thought this cat is marching the beat of a different drummer. I don't know if it's going to work or not, but let's jump in and see.
And it worked.
And he just zigged when everybody else was zagging, or he zagged when everybody else was zigging. And he got offered a fine job at Maxis to go be kind of Will Wright's mobile leader. And just thought, I think I want to zag, and there's not a lot of people zagging right now.
He made Flower, he made Journey. Right?
Yeah, and then he and I joined forces about 10 years ago, and he made Sky, and it's become one of the most popular games in China. He's made hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue and hundreds of millions of dollars in profit, like unimaginable compared to what he was working with when he was making Journey with a small team. Now he's got a much larger team.
11 people on Journey, right?
Yeah, but I think the problem is that as the market potentially shrinks at the top, or that growth seems to be slowing down, the venture dollars start drying up, and so you have this vicious cycle where there may be really great ideas out there to be financed, but those ideas are essentially starved of capital. And so you don't have those engines of potential hiring that you might have had in the more flush days of when Bing and I were operating as venture capitalists.
Yeah.
There's plenty of other media publishing businesses where the career path is gone.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really a
right?
career path in book publishing anymore. There's certainly not a career path in Hollywood studios anymore. It's all about entrepreneurship. Got advice.
I think we're
friends of a guy
also
named Danny Bilson who introduced us to a couple of producers with Oscars and bankable producers, and they said there's no career path anymore. You got to find a script champion and figure out how to get it made. And I think that is kind of the unbundling of the entertainment business in general.
Yeah.
Got to find an idea and stick with it. But it can't be an idea that requires $100 million because you don't get the zag and get $100 million out the gate.
I do like your point about AI too, in that it can have that effect of maybe the 1,000 person company can get the same stuff done now with 100 people, right?
Yes.
That's a problem. But the other good thing about it is that the one person company can maybe do the work of 10 people now.
Yes.
And that the results you get out of that could be amazing.
And then what happens instead of think if you're running a game team or you're in a game team, you've got to spin up a lot of people. It becomes basically an industrial exercise. And really the best game development that I've ever known or seen comes from a process of iteration in some form. I mean, it goes a lot deeper than that. So iteration is really hard when you've got a huge budget, a lot of people, a set of processes that you can't really change that much, and a whole bunch of timelines to go meet. So with smaller teams, what you really do is you get back to, smart people arguing in front of a whiteboard about what the game mechanics are. And I think it's really important to get to. And that's the lesson of the indie world. I mean, that's a lesson
I was going to say, I would ask you about that. Your nimbleness, your agility with 30 people or 50 people compared to 300 or 500 people is like 300 or 500 people. You need layers of management in order to make it work. You need an HR department. You need benefits and payroll, like, that you can go out and sell to people and whatever. And like all of that takes time away from design.
It's the management burden that's takes away your nimbleness, as you said, but there's also a creative side to it too, which is a lot of stuff that you just can't do creatively at scale. I think I found this a lot leading the team is for any sort of general concept, there tends to be like a gravity well default idea that everyone is pulled towards just because that's kind of the default normal thing. Like if you're doing a fantasy game, it has to have these sparkly magic and elves and dwarves. If you're doing sci-fi, it has to have something kind of like Star Trek or Star Wars. It's really hard to do something really different. If you look at examples that do break out of this, it tends to come from tiny teams like Zeekers with Lethal Company. Got a really weird tone and strange art and kind of jank. I can't imagine trying to get
kooky ideas that would never
20 people on board with that idea
ideas.
and actually getting them to make it, much less 200. Like it would be completely impossible. So I think that if we're looking past maybe this year or next year into the deeper future with AI and new tooling and so on and so forth, it could restructure the industry in such a way where there's a lot more people making a lot more different games with smaller audiences, as opposed to, there's 12 huge games a year and everyone has to play one of those, and those each have $200 million budget. Now there's going to be, like you think there's a lot of indie games now, imagine there's 5,000 games coming out every year and they're all really nicely produced because they have all this AI tools, but they're all made for very narrow audiences. So, if you have a team of 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 or 20 people, you don't need to sell that many copies to be doing pretty darn well. So it could just fragment the entire industry in that way. So the kind of people who would thrive in that environment would be the people who can use those tools, run a creative process, not the kind of person who is a small piece of a much larger structure.
And it would be a much better use of talent that goes into the games industry because you have to be enormously talented to make it, to be in any part of the value chain of making a video game.
Right.
I do sort of like the notion that people do respond when they hit barriers. Like they find other solutions. The whole DeepSeek thing. For the Chinese developers who couldn't get enough GPUs, right? It's a barrier,
constraints,
and they deal with that constraint in a way. And
stressed grapes make the best the best wine.
I mean, I do see when I wonder what you guys think of this, where I think, Amir Satvat, again, with his stats, believes that, say, more hiring is happening as of January than firing in the game industry for the first time in 30 months. And so we've got 1 month of a data point that's helpful here. But he thinks that it's not evident because the growth around the world in jobs is not even, right? And so places like China, on the success of Black Myth Wukong, they're more confident. They can actually think that, their Chinese developers who are cheaper are actually just as capable now as, others. And so for all the people pouring out of these American game schools now, they, according to Amir, have a 1% chance of getting a job in the first year of looking for a job in games. Right, and so
that is grim.
Yeah. So what happens? I think the solution I see then is go into making games for Minecraft, Fortnite, and Roblox, and that is the new ground floor for getting into games. What do you guys think?
I mean, I think that's been around for a long time. People have been making indie games and mods, frankly.
Before that, it was mods.
Yeah, to start out with, I started doing mods, and you can still make interesting games. You don't have to be doing it in Roblox and Minecraft. We have good tooling these days. You can do a lot with Unity and one person. And
early mobile, like we're 10, 15 person teams, right?
Yeah. Or less. Like you get a lot by being really tiny. It gives you a lot of freedom. So I for a certain type of person, I think that is still a tremendous opportunity.
Yeah, I think that we really have to rethink AAA. I think that's
a great point.
A real conclusion.
What is the definition of AAA?
Yeah, because I do think that the model that the industry has operated under historically, which is this, I call it the campaign nature of AAA, where it's like raise an army and go on the march. And I did an offsite, or not an offsite, but a fireside chat with the Riot founders at one of their management offsites on the 15th anniversary of my investment in League of Legends. And I think they expected me to come in and tell old stories from the good old days. And I came in and basically said, like, the way that these businesses are currently being run is unsustainable and untenable. That, like, this idea of needing 500 people in 5 to 10 years to make a product is no longer really a viable strategy.
Yeah.
What'd they say when you said that?
They agreed broadly, I think. I mean, I think they've felt some stress around their limited product release slate. Where they've essentially gotten 3 products out in the last 12 years.
Yeah.
I was noticing BioWare at EA, and I think when EA bought BioWare, they were able to make 7 games at a time, right? And they just announced, after sort of shipping sort of the lackluster Dragon Age game, that they were going to go down to making 1 game at a time, right? And I'm pretty sure that they have a lot more people now working for them than they did when they were making 7 games at a time. Like, that's crazy, and it's sad, and I don't know. I mean, that's a dose of reality, I think.
Yeah, I think it is pretty wild to note that some of these modern ultra AAA games that are being made with hundreds and hundreds of people for 5 years are still being compared directly and not always favorably with games that came out 10 years ago, like Skyrim, that was made in a few years with 100 people. Yeah. So what did we get for all that, right? Like, I really asked that question on the creative side. I mean, it's got some jank. It doesn't look quite as pixel perfect as some modern games, but it's still an amazing experience. It's super fun. And frankly, it gives you stuff that you don't get in this modern environment where we demand that everything has to be perfectly animated and pixel accurate. But you take away the player's freedom to screw with whatever's going on there.
I don't think that the consumers are as concerned about it as they used to be. I think that it's a really small group of kind of vocal people in the games industry who are still pixel focused, who are still paying for pixels.
I think it's always been an issue with the way the decisions are made in these corporations, because they've learned to optimize these games for demo value instead of play value. Demo is in what can we show in 3, 5, 10 minutes to a decision maker in a board meeting somewhere.
The demo starts at the green light.
The demo starts, and then you see like this rabbit, and it animates perfectly, and it sniffs, and it looks around. But the player can't touch the rabbit, because if they did, everything would break, right? So we're going to make the player not able to touch. Interactivity goes down.
Totally.
10, 20 years ago, the rabbit would look like crap, but you could do whatever you want to it, right? And that is actually more valuable to the player in most cases, right? Creatively, there's a place for perfect pre-rendered everything.
I think that's absolutely right.
But acceptance of jank, it just doesn't look good on a demo screen, but it feels great when you're playing.
Yeah, but you look at Minecraft and Roblox, right? I mean, these are things that
those are the way more extreme examples, right?
But still, they're extraordinarily janky in the sense of Lego-like and very blocky and like 8-bit era. Retro, and it doesn't. They don't skip a beat. People love them.
I mean, that goes to why does the game industry exist? Like, what are we trying to do? We're trying to have fun, and all the other stuff that you talked about is all the stuff that we spend a lot of money and a lot of time and a lot of effort thinking about. But it doesn't do the one thing that we all want and why we play games, which is to have fun. Right. And AAA is not defined by the last polygon on the screen. It's defined by how fun it is to play for a long time. And Zeekers is the most recent example, or Lethal Company is the most recent, really good example of that. But Minecraft is the ultimate example of that. It looked like it came out in 1988, and it was insanely fun.
Right. I think that there's this cognitive, so many examples. There's this cognitive bias that happens when people evaluate a game where I call it choice blindness, in that when you're playing the game, you're having this psychological experience of playing, and you feel like, I'm this character, I'm here, and you're thinking about all the things you could do. And all those possibilities that you could do but didn't do, they still have an effect on your experience. You still feel the emotions that this could have happened, and it didn't happen. I didn't choose to do that, but that is really important. So you're going to play through, and you're going to create what essentially looks like a single-threaded video of A happened, then B happened, then C happened. But the experience of creating that with full choice to go in a million directions is much different than playing through something that's super railroaded. And I think that gets lost a lot of the time.
Yeah.
And so now we have these games that look amazing because they're railroaded, but they lose the vibrancy. And also, they demand this incredible level of production because they're trying to make that video look so good. They're not obsessed at the corporate level with how can we make this more interactive, right? Like imagine we made Skyrim, but then put like 10 times the budget in it and put none of that into any kind of visual or video improving stuff and all of it into interactivity and psychology and the artificial intelligence and what you can do with the world, how can you affect the world. I don't even know if that's ever been done at that scale, but it would be fascinating to try that. But
their dragons look so cool in the ad, man.
Yeah.
To look for metaphors, think about commerce. Within Amazon, there was a bunch of consternation because jobs were lost in shopping malls. And people kept buying stuff, and they actually bought more stuff, and it got to be cheaper. And, to some degree, the game publishers that are most famous, the big ones, are kind of like shopping malls. And maybe the mobile business was like Amazon. Roblox is Shopify. Mm-hmm. Nobody in commerce believed in Shopify along the way. As a matter of fact, Jeff Wilke at Amazon even shut down Amazon's web store by Amazon and told all the customers, go to this crappy little company called Shopify because we're not going to support you. So, this technology does have a way of obsoleting kind of old business models. And so I think we're looking at the beginning of the obsolescence of a particular business model. And maybe the second business model. The first was the packaged goods business, and we all saw that except for Tynan. The rest of us saw that get started. And mobile, with NEA, there was no belief that mobile was going to matter. There was no belief that that casual web games were going to matter. And, the company suffered for about 5 years because of that. So, this is kind of a normal pattern.
I like how we are all sort of circling in on fun as a solution to a lot of these problems. And this is a group of business folks here, right? And I think Owen, I think you feel like, say, we often are pitting sort of business interests against creativity, right? But do you feel like this is a false dichotomy? Right?
I definitely think it's a false dichotomy. I mean, I agree 100% with the distribution issues and the reconstruction of the industry that needs to sort of happen on the distribution side. But I think one of the reasons why I'm actually very excited about the future is I think we're starting to talk seriously about this exact problem in the industry. And new technology is enabling this. I mean, there's two big things that are happening right now. One is the rise of AI, which I think represents huge opportunity to grow our industry because it enables small teams to do so much more than they were before. And that's really sincere. I mean, I think it's going to be huge. It also enables games to scale the whole team. For example, in a live online game, you can scale that much better because you have AI. And we experimented with this a lot. But I think when you can have smaller teams, it brings a creativity back into the process. And that's the thing that, as a customer, I'm kind of like, I wish there were more really good and interesting games that made me think. And I think, the thing where you sort of squeeze the situation, this situation looks really pressed. At that point is where you start to get creative about how you do things. And taking out this sort of archaic idea that we need an industrial process to create a AAA game, because that's how they used to do it in the Hollywood, is archaic. And we're finding we're at the end of that, and we can do it in a different way. And we've seen there are enough good examples that happen in anywhere between the 1-person to 70-person level where you get really good AAA games. And I think that's gonna be a renaissance for the industry.
And I do think it is that business and fun are not antithetical. And I think at all. And I think when
you're selling fun,
you're in that business if you don't deliver that.
You can't sell it if it isn't fun. I mean, I remember when we were friendly competitors as venture capitalists, it's like I remember talking to you about like Clash of Clans, and you were like obsessed with Clash of Clans, and it wasn't even an investment of yours. But you were really like trying to think through deeply how it worked and why.
And I was happy to keep paying for things along the way.
Exactly. And I think people like us who at least were operating successfully in the business, doing really sort of landmark deals like Zynga and others. We were obsessed with fun and trying to figure out like ways that we could make that more scalable and more available and to take advantage of these new opportunities and arbitrage opportunities in the market to get these things distributed to people that historically we would like little companies would have been completely like priced out of the market because they would have had to have gone to a big publisher and given up 70% of the revenue in order to get access to the shelf, which doesn't happen anymore. And so again, I think that maybe in really big companies where where basically they're playing the spreadsheet. If for lack of a better word, there is a little bit greater gulf. But I think at the level of investment that we were operating at, fun was the most important part.
Well, there's a.
By the way, I remember you saying a lot that say the most creative people in your company would pitch you as the CEO, and they would pitch you the game that they thought you wanted to hear.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, they definitely do that. And I was like, don't give me that. I want to know what we should be playing and what we want to play.
And
that's how we ended up on the finals.
I think as venture has gotten more diluted, there's more new people in the business. There's more game specific funds that have gotten raised. I think some of that has started to happen in venture. And
interesting.
Like toward the end of my venture career, before I retired, I was starting to see what looked like internal pitches.
Fundable games rather than fun games.
Like low stakes, like, reasons why that this was a lower risk. And I would always say, I'm a risk seeker.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because if I can't take a big risk, I'm not going to be able to get out of your red ocean.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, I think sometimes you can find those opportunities that look like a bag of gold sitting on the ground, right? Where like it's something that you feel very confident is going to work, and for some reason, no one else has done it in the way that you think you can. So I think those are really like what I'm looking for all the time, essentially.
Yeah, but today, and I only see this now through my friends who occasionally show me stuff and ask for my opinion, and friends in the venture business, like they're getting pitched by former senior executives at companies that have been laid off, that have had a dream game in their drawer for half a decade, and are now out looking for $30 to $100 million in funding in order to bring that game to market. And to me, that is just radioactive. I wouldn't go anywhere near that stuff. But I think that people
because they're going to end up in the same red ocean. It's the same big budget, same massive organization, same industrial process.
Well, and also a real misunderstanding of where value is created, right? Like the reason publisher funding exists and works is because the publisher, through their own public equity, aggregates value from the revenue generated by the products that they acquire or that they license. When you're independent and you've raised venture, the product isn't what makes your company valuable. It's the company that's meant to be valuable. And you've got to look for a way to create value in the equity of your company and then potentially get it liquid. And I think that distinction is utterly lost on a lot of creatives who are pitching to venture capitalists.
Yeah.
So we've talked a lot about red ocean. Where is the blue ocean? From your perspectives?
I think Roblox is producing a lot of interesting blue ocean. I haven't seen as much come out of UEFN as I hoped. Most of the content I've seen come out of UEFN has been pretty mundane. I don't know if you guys have experienced anything different.
It's been exactly the same, and I think they're pretty limited creatively.
I think one of the interesting things on UEFN was a lot of the creators were getting into financing their own games, right? And so they're collecting their own teams and, doing so well, like I think Typical Gamer was one with 25 million followers, and he's hired his own team to make a bunch of UEFN games.
Well, I mean, so to go back to your question, so what is a blue ocean? The ultimate example for blue ocean is Cirque du Soleil, right? Where they and one of the things that they did is they took the animals out of the circus. Turns out animals were both the most expensive part and the thing that most turned people off to circuses. And they brought in the jugglers and the acrobats who everybody just loves more than anything.
And they glammed it up, right? They turned it into theater as opposed to this grim kind of like smelly popcorn stank kind of thing that you associated with
clowns.
Scary clowns that you associated with sort of the Barnum and Bailey era of circuses. They turned it into to an event.
Yeah.
And the animals commiserated and said, "There's a lot of us are losing our jobs," and nobody said to the lion, "Learn to juggle, dude."
But like, so what do? They brought real play. They sort of reconstructed the whole thing and said, okay, why do people really come here? What's really fun about this experience? Mm-hmm. Again, thankfully, we're starting to have this conversation more. When you and I last talked, I was like, we need a lot more of this. We need to spend a lot more time thinking about The Sims, Minecraft, GTA 3. I would put RimWorld on that list, Lethal Company on that list, The Finals. We did this at Nexon. It was like stuff that's way out there, as far out there as you can get, either within your genre or creating a whole new genre. Really focus on the fun part, and then put it out there. And you not only don't need a lot of money to do that, you also don't want a lot of money. To Tynan's point, like that, that's the Cirque du Soleil blue ocean opportunity for our industry.
I think we're going to see coming out of what I'll call the platform aspect of AI. So like just to lay set the table a little bit, there's kind of three ways that I think AI is going to show up in the games business. The first way is, and the most mundane way, I think, is that it's going to create like better versions of things we already see in games.
It's the new outsourcing. It's cheaper outsourcing.
Well, no, that's the second one. The first one is basically like hyper-intelligent NPCs or like
LLMs powered NPCs.
AI.
Or help systems like that guide you through the game like with artificial intelligence that are context aware or whatever that you can talk to.
Yeah.
I think that stuff is not that interesting to me, frankly. And I think we're going to see a ton of it.
Yeah.
The second thing is what Bing's talking about, which is this idea where you can really see AI as a force multiplier, where it's going to create a real productivity enhancement in games at the production level, and maybe even at the live
tools.
ops, coding tools, art generators.
And what's interesting about that is not that it lets you do the same games cheaper, but it lets you do more experimental things.
Right, and with fewer people.
And you have more shots on goal, so you have more chance of finding that blue ocean.
But I think the blue ocean that I think there's a third bucket, and I think that's the bucket where we will really see the blue ocean breakout, and that is the thing that you couldn't do before that you can now do with AI. And I think some of those things may look really weird to us, like some of those things have in the past when we've had those inflections, where they may look interactive, but not like conventional games.
Yeah.
And I think those are the things that I'm looking for that I think are going to be really, really exciting and that may produce those kinds of real blue ocean opportunities to create completely new companies.
The analogy to what you're saying is what happened at the dawn of the internet. Like, so it was the mid 90s. And most people couldn't get their heads around what hypertext was. They couldn't. It was really hard for them to compute what the internet really meant. And so you take the newspaper and you just throw it up on the screen. And so it was like a pixelated New York Times or Wall Street Journal. And in those days, you couldn't imagine social networking or streaming video or Wikipedia.
It couldn't imagine UGC.
Couldn't imagine UGC.
Think about this. Unboxing videos on YouTube are like a multi-$100 million advertising.
Who would have
business.
thunk of unboxing videos would be a form of entertainment?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like if you had gone to somebody like in 2000, 5 years before the launch of YouTube, and said, you know what, in 5 years, unboxing videos are going to to be this like source of advertising, but people would think you were insane.
There's a guy named Kevin Kelly who I like a lot, and he was an early writer for Wired, but in 2005, he looked back at 95 and all the headlines about the internet, and he said, in 95, WAGs correctly predicted all the categories of businesses that were going to happen. They didn't predict the size. He said the one thing nobody predicted was the B-roll. And in 2005, more than half of the web page views were amateur created. And I think this whole UGC has been a shocking aspect of internet usage over the last 30 years.
I think it goes to the general principle is when there's new tech and we can kind of see it coming. If you even go back to the 80s or earlier science fiction, people would imagine, you could have a global communications network and you could like read the newspaper on it. And there's some straightforward things that they understood, and those did turn out to be true. We do have Zoom calls and video calls, and you can read the newspaper, but those didn't turn out to be what's really important. The stuff that was really important turned out to be social networking and these sorts of
Second order.
Search turned out to be
search turned out to be incredibly important.
probably the best
streaming,
business model,
even
best
when I
business
first
model since religion.
when I first heard about video game streaming, I was like, why would you want to watch someone else play a video game, right? But it turned out to be tremendously important. So it is a mixture of, the stuff that is obvious will be true, but probably won't be the big important thing.
Yeah.
It'll be something else that's just got like multiple layers of interaction from here to there.
I think there is.
But the answer is the blue ocean is new shit.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. Blue ocean is new shit that people actually want.
New shit from a new group of people in most cases.
Most likely.
Yeah.
I think there's one hopeful thing too about the growth of the external development industry, and I think Keywords has 12,000 people now. And Virtuous has 4,000, and they can be applied to whatever, say, is good and is fun and is interesting, no matter who it's coming from. Like EA can use these people if they've got a game that they need to get even more people behind. But so can some of the smaller companies. Like they can tap lots of humans who probably are not going to be eliminated by AI, right? Because they can be brought into a game, finish that game, and make it sort of polished and shine. And I think that's a positive thing. I did wonder if, like, in this sort of solution space, that we have some way to get to positivity about the game industry. I don't know if there's more things that you think of, that maybe are helpful, like the modularity of the external development industry.
I think it's a good point. I think there's a sort of a uber point on top of, or a meta point on what you're saying, which is, look, it's really easy to see how things change and new technology changes and makes bad news for the existing structure that's in it. What's harder, for the reason we were just talking about, is to anticipate all the new stuff that comes out that are second and third order effects. We can't predict what the, unboxing video equivalent will be thanks to the dawn of AI. And so what we don't see is all the people who are making unboxing videos, right? We don't see that today. So what we do see is what's at risk on the existing system. And so
when me and Eric Goldberg and Ilka and all these people were making WAP games in 2000, right? Like on Motorola flip phones and Nokia, candy bar phones. The idea that would become half of the video game business's $200 billion in revenue is insane, right? It's insane. People I knew in the video game business, when I quit my extraordinarily high-paying and very important job as head of studios at Activision to go start an idiotic mobile game company,
does not compute.
It did not compute, right? Yet that's what happened. And I think that's the glimmer of hope that I think that I have for the video game business, which is we can't anticipate these things. These things are black swan-like events that happen in the
and it creates a whole new class of people. And again, let's remember the dawn of the internet tripled the size of the industry. The dawn of mobile tripled the size of the industry. It became a lot bigger with a lot more people as a result of it, but you just couldn't see exactly how it was going to play out.
I think like my definition of back to good times for the industry would be we see revenue growth, right? We've stalled on that. We want to have that revenue growth. We also want to see job growth among the game developers of the industry, like people who are happy, who are wanting to be in this industry rather than deciding, I got to get out of this industry and go into something that's stable, right? And then acceptance of new technology, right? I think AI, other things, rather than reject it and automatically assume that blockchain's just out there to scam me or something,
exactly.
right?
No, I think that's the general perception. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and so I think if we can get to all sort of these things growing at the same time, then I think that feels like
the only piece of that I would take issue with is the labor piece, and that is
the job creation.
Yeah, because I've seen this in Hollywood as well. There's a real sort of fleeing from Hollywood at the moment where I was talking to a friend of mine who I'm working on a company with, who's a very well-known producer in Hollywood, and I was like, you need to hire some development executives because we are not getting scripts through fast enough to production. And he was like, they've all gone to games. and over the last 5 years, and like they're all gone from Hollywood. And I think games is now experiencing its own flight that Hollywood has. And it may be that we were overstaffed during the coming out of the pandemic, perhaps when we reached sort of peak old school AAA games where the 300 to 500 person teams were the norm and dinosaurs roamed the earth. And it may be that the period we're going to go through now will result in an overall smaller but healthier industry from a labor perspective.
You want to doge the games business?
No, I don't. Please don't put me in that bucket. There's plenty of people.
Doge. But the idea, at least, of these people are useful, I think, is a good one, because like one of the companies that's coming to recruit at the Game Developers Conference is Duolingo. And, they're adjacent to the game industry because they need people who understand game engines and, fun ways to engage and entertain their learners so that they stay around longer, right? And so who better is good at that than game developers, right? And so like they're hiring people, and I would hope that, like, say, as this sort of game technology spreads everywhere, that people then can find that work, if not in the game industry, then the adjacent industry.
Well, imagine an industry that is empowered to do sort of the work that's the hardest but requires the most amount of people, thanks to new technology. And so you can empower small teams to do really creative stuff and be very close to the development of the product. That seems like a better job for people than the factory work that ends up being a lot of what the existing games industry is on a 500-person AAA game.
And I think a lot of that work could take forms that don't seem obvious from the point of view now. The analogy I might use is to say, okay, we could say the film industry is this certain size, but if you add on all like the YouTube content creators and the Twitch streamers and all these people, they are creating video entertainment. So in some sense, maybe that's a new area.
Way more video than ever.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
more video than ever. They're not
Orders of
making
magnitude.
movies that we would call movies or recognize as that
But it's sure
necessarily.
entertaining.
So if you look at gaming, if we imagine that some level of future technology will permit people to create experiences very cheaply and very customizably that are compelling to interact with, and you could see like a tremendous variation of people doing Duolingo-type products all across the spectrum, whether it's something that connects you with your pets or helps you learn a language or puts you together personally with your grandma. And if it gets cheap enough, you're at a point where you're hiring a wedding photographer to make a game just for you, to hang out with your wife. You want like a personalized adventure to go on. So I think that, there is, as the production cost goes down, the demand comes up to meet it to some degree. It's just it's restructured very aggressively.
I think
from
I
how the
would
industry
amend
is now.
my comment to be then not just create jobs for the sake of creating jobs or filling up the rosters of very large companies, but to maybe create very satisfying jobs.
Yeah, and I think
exactly.
Tynan's point is super important in that regard, because I do think that's exactly what happened in linear, which is that a whole new class of people entered and built sort of bottom up businesses as individuals or even as small companies because they took advantage of it. I would say that the enabling technology there was distribution. And I think that's the one thing that I have a little bit of fear around
About
because distribution has so consolidated in the video game business to date, where Valve has gotten to be, I think, overly important to the launch of PC product. Obviously, the sort of moats that have been built around the consoles create distribution barriers, and iOS and the Google Play Store are just like a dog's breakfast when it comes to like trying to get noticed above the thousands of products that are launched every month. And so I really believe that we need as well as innovation on the interactive side, on the product side.
It's on the distribution
we
side.
absolutely need to accompany that with innovation on the distribution side in order to see that happen.
I think we're good. Does anybody have something they really wanted to get across left in them?
Back, talk about the oligopoly of distribution right now. It's still there's 5 players who are kind of grinding all the profits out of the creators. But back in the early days, Toys R Us accounted for 22%, and Radio Shack Tandy only carried 5 games a year. So if you wanted to be a top 5 PC game, you had to get in there. So I'm always nervous about blaming distribution for the creator's problem, because distribution ends up taking 30%. It used to be 50%, and they price it down to take 35%. Or with Amazon, it's kind of 25%. And somebody's going to build a business and take 30%. And you can go direct to some people if you have those kind of skills. But that being said, Reid Hoffman looks at every business and starts out with distribution, and he's smarter than me.
So maybe you're saying it could be a creativity problem that we have at
the very first game developers conference that I went to, and Chris Crawford and about 40 people in a bad hotel ballroom. Every developer there complained, the retail is screwing me up. He said they don't sell my product. I'm going, you don't understand. That's not the way retail works. What retail does is you can go in on spec and they'll pay you when they want a new shipment. And it's not retail's job to sell your stuff. And, we had a little time in the beginning of the app stores where they actually tried to give free promotion, and they got rid of all that. Facebook, when it launched, gave very free promotion and ground it all out. So distribution is always going to be a grind for creative people. It's kind of their job is to try to get more than their fair share of the profits. So I think the issue that the internet kind of solved for us is to get customers to pay for hours, and which didn't work in packaged goods. So we've got this whole new business model of connected games with downstream monetization, and then with mobile with downstream monetization.
Yep. Yeah, it's an elasticity problem. I mean, we had this, historically, the packaged goods part of the games business was this inelastic thing where if I wanted to play a game for 10 hours, I paid $60. And if Bing wanted to play it for 15,000 hours, he paid $60.
Right.
Yeah. And we fixed that with the internet and with free-to-play, by and large.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
Sonic the Hedgehog has done like $1 billion so far with the films and other properties. What would you say about the craziness of something like that, or Zelda, or any of these gaming properties, and the generational effect that it has? For example, I showed my 3-year-old son Sonic. He loves it. My 13-year-old nephew, he's super into Sonic. When you talk about the long-term value creation and IP being so critical to the game industry.
It's really important.
Creativity has
It's
to
interesting. Like in the year that Barbenheimer happened, right? Like Barbie and Oppenheimer, the number 3 grossing film globally was Mario.
By the way, you talk about Disney franchise. Remember when Michael Eisner came in? Everybody could prove that Disney properties had no forward value, and it just took. And he didn't change distribution.
No.
He just, he did windowing and made new stuff.
I was going to say that kind of changed distribution a little bit. I was there during that era, so I can tell you the windowing helped a lot.
Well, yeah, but that's what I said. But that wasn't a distribution thing. That was a marketing trick.
They would put out.
Still had to sell it through the same stores as everybody else.
True. They would put out Bambi, for example, and then they would have it on the shelves, and then they would announce that they were going to take it down, and they would not offer it again for 7 years. And so if you had a child, you either bought it or they would never see it when they were a child, parent, right? Yeah. And so
it wasn't a distribution.
Yeah.
It was a marketing hack. Right. But they didn't get rid of Walmart.
Fast forward to Disney now too, and last year Bob Iger got on the phone to explain why he was putting $1.5 billion into Epic, and he said that someone came to him and had this demographics chart and said, look, Gen Z, they're not doing Disney. Like, they're in Roblox all the time. They're not watching TV. They don't know who Disney is. In a generation from now, we are gone, right? As a brand, nobody knows us. And there's a reason to invest in Fortnite. And
Well, that might,
So
that might be the right framing of the problem, but not necessarily the right solution.
Do
to the problem.
10-year-olds no longer care about Frozen?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway,
why you drop
but
hundreds
yeah,
of
it's like continuously you have to pay attention and change. Right?
Can I just add one more follow-up to that?
Sure.
Talking about job creation, if you look at a guy like Speed who's made 10 million as a streamer with a smaller studio model, maybe there's a way that you could have a smaller, newer studio with a few people, and you go to partner with someone like Speed that can bring the games forward. And there's new ways to create a marketing push that didn't exist before.
And things that
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
We've seen it happen. I mean, Apex Legends that's how they launched, basically with a very clever influencer campaign based around streamers.
And you made that point about Roblox or
Minecraft. I mean, Minecraft
They
is
launched
unbelievable.
concurrently with YouTube.
So there have
essentially.
been 1 trillion views of videos associated with Minecraft since its launch, and and Minecraft video creators have generated. I mean, there are hundreds of millionaires who have been coined out of just being a linear streamer.
The total
of Minecraft.
market cap of all the creators on Roblox probably doesn't add up to the market cap
Minecraft,
or Minecraft
YouTube videos.
YouTube video audience. It's an astonishing phenomenon. And you think of all of the free marketing and all of the free tutorials and all of the enablement that was generated really by the community around this product that the product benefited from. I mean, it is absolutely nirvana from a business perspective.
That's what I was going to say about the Lego movie. It grossed 450 million, but it also boosted Lego sales 25%. You have this entire new way to make money within gaming, not just with people who are playing, but also in the ways that they want to consume gaming in other ways. And that seems pretty exciting.
Yeah,
it's
movies are a good way to get that brand in front of that new generation.
I mean, that's what they call the media flywheel. And actually, Walt Disney was the first person to really hack that up. And Disney and Iger 1.0 was really good at that. Like you'd go on the boat, you'd stay in the hotel, you'd go to the theme park, you watch the movie. In the old days, you'd buy the record. That still exists. It's just in different form.
And everybody thought that the original Disneyland was crazy. Couldn't raise money for it. And a TV show that he did also seemed out of the box.
And they've made it a multi-generational thing where now you have the entire family from grandpa down to the baby who's consuming kind of all these products together, which is really powerful.
And the theme park, as a former employee, the theme park experience is vital to synergy. Like synergy is the big concept at Disney, which is the thing that links together all of these disparate
the theme park
elements.
is the center of
It's the center of all of it,
spokes,
yeah.
right?
Pokemon Go Fest is also really important to the sustainability of Pokemon Go.
So I guess the encouraging thing as we bring this to a close is that it's still possible out there for some solo creator to be the next Disney.
Yes,
Absolutely.
indeed.
There's that. I think there is another encouraging thing in the long term, which is the generational expansion of the audience of games.
For sure.
I mean, as it stands, it's really just people roughly 45 and under who were young when games became really a widespread playable thing, and that's only in the West. In the East, they're even younger than that, so or in other countries. So I think you're seeing this wave front of age that's moving up. And by the time the people who are 45 now, by the time they hit 80 and 85 and they're in retirement homes, they'll still be playing games.
I mean, I'm 63, and when I was started gaming, it was a nerd fringe activity
it was
that
super
you had
fringe.
to build your own PC and whatever. And now it's utterly mainstream.
I always thought it was boys
more
who
women,
turned
more
16
people around the
after
world.
1987 when Nintendo started working.
Right.
And girls who turned 16 after 99, 2000 when things like The Sims started coming out.
So people are living longer and longer, and that wave front is moving forward. And you know what? Old people, they like to, they're not always that quick, and sometimes they want to sit around with their friends and have some fun.
And honestly,
in a relaxed environment.
And they're looking to do things with their kids.
With
or
their kids
grandkids,
too,
Yeah,
right?
very much so.
And so I think that is going to be a multi-decade driver of growth.
Yeah,
A
that's a
few
good
of you
point.
guys have retired here, and I wonder if you're getting through your piles of shame and playing everything you ever wanted to play now.
I'm playing fewer things longer than I used to.
Dean, I never had any shame.
Yeah, I never had a shame.
I used to be more of an omnivore when I was younger, and I would play things a little bit and get a taste of them and whatever. And I find myself sort of gravitating toward a fewer but sort of longer term projects.
I'm more social now. Like almost everything I play, I try to play with people I know.
I play a lot with my kids, so if they're playing it. But going back to your point before, multi-generational, I'll tell you a story about that really speaks to this. So the best single gift I ever got in my life was Father's Day when I was traveling a lot. I was at Nexon and I missed my kids a lot. And my son texted me, he was like 8 at the time, and he said, "Hey, Dad, I've got a present for you. Go on our Minecraft server." And he made this house, and it said Daddy's house on the outside. It was kind of a corny story, but it illustrates what you're saying. It was really meaningful to me because I really missed him. He missed me. And he made his house right next to it. It had books on it because he knew I liked books. And then we had like a railroad that went off into the hills in our server so that we could play together. And that was his way of getting agency in his world. And he was, again, like 8 or 9 or something
if you
like that.
paid him, you would have been a game job creator. It just wouldn't have been $200,000 a year.
Exactly.
All right.
Thanks, Dean.
Well, thank you.
Thanks,
everybody.
Dean. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.